He slid a whiteboard into their living room on a Sunday morning. Not a painting, not a piece of furniture, a whiteboard. His wife looked at it, looked at him, and said, "Are you serious right now?" He was completely serious. And what happened in that living room over the next hour changed their marriage in a way that neither therapy nor vacations nor date nights had ever managed to do. This is not a story about a perfect couple. It is not a story about people who had it figured out from the beginning. It is a story about two people who were smart enough to build companies but kept failing at the one partnership that mattered more than any business they would ever run. And the moment they decided to stop treating their marriage like a feeling and start treating it like a strategy, everything changed. The numbers, the connection, the future, all of it. If that sounds cold to you, stay with me, because by the end of this, I promise you will see it as the most romantic thing two people can do for each other. And if this kind of story is what you come here for, the ones that flip what you thought you knew completely upside down, hit subscribe right now and stick with Shadowlight Stories, because there is a detail later in this story that almost nobody knows, and it is the part that will genuinely stay with you. Their names are Marcus and Danielle. They met in Atlanta in 2014 at a startup pitch event, the kind of room full of energy drinks and ambition where everyone is simultaneously inspired and exhausted. Marcus was pitching a logistics software idea. Danielle was there evaluating companies for a small venture fund she worked with. She did not invest in his company. She did, however, give him her number. They dated for 2 years, got married in 2016, and by 2019, were sitting in a marriage counselor's office, wondering how two people who were genuinely good at building things had somehow built something that felt like it was quietly falling apart. Here is what was happening. Marcus had grown his logistics company to 11 employees and just under $2 million in annual revenue. Danielle had left the venture fund and launched her own consulting firm, which in its second year was already pulling 6 figures. By every external measure, they were winning. 2 careers, 1 household, real financial momentum. But inside the marriage, there was this slow erosion that neither of them had a language for. They were ships passing. Decisions about money, about time, about what they wanted the next 10 years to look like. These conversations kept getting postponed because something more urgent always came first. The marriage was running, but it was running without a roadmap, and you can only run without a roadmap for so long before you realize you have been covering distance without going anywhere. The counselor they saw was good. She helped them communicate better. She helped them understand each other's stress responses. But Marcus kept leaving those sessions with a nagging feeling that something was still missing. He described it this way in an interview years later. He said the counseling felt like debugging the relationship one bug at a time. But nobody was looking at the architecture, and Marcus was an engineer at heart. He knew that if the architecture was wrong, fixing individual bugs would never be enough. So one Sunday morning in March of 2019, he brought home a whiteboard, and he sat down with Danielle and said, "I want us to treat our marriage the way we treat our best projects. Not because love is a transaction, but because the things we love most deserve our most serious thinking." Danielle was skeptical. She told him it felt clinical. He told her, "We are already being clinical. We are just doing it badly." That landed. She sat down. What they did over the next 3 hours is something that the team at Shadowlight Stories spent time trying to fully understand, because it sounds simple on the surface, but the depth of it only reveals itself when you look closely. They started with what Marcus called a vision audit. They each wrote down, separately and without showing each other, what they wanted their life to look like in 10 years. Not career goals. Life goals. Where they lived, how they spent their time, what they wanted to feel when they woke up in the morning. Then they compared the 2 lists. And for the first time in years, they saw clearly where they were aligned and where they were quietly pulling in different directions without ever having said it out loud. The gap was not dramatic. It was not a fundamental incompatibility. It was the kind of drift that happens when 2 busy, driven people assume they are on the same page because they love each other, without ever actually checking. Danielle had been picturing a slower life in 3 years. Less travel, possibly a move out of Atlanta, eventually more space for things that had nothing to do with work. Marcus had been building toward a larger company, more scale, more complexity. Neither of them was wrong, but neither of them had known the other was heading somewhere slightly different. That conversation, right there, was worth more than 18 months of weekly counseling sessions. Not because the counseling was bad, because this was a different kind of honest. From that Sunday forward, they built what Marcus started calling their operating system. Every quarter they sat down together, not for a romantic dinner, not for a vacation planning session, but for a genuine strategic review of their life as a partnership. They looked at their finances together with the same rigor Marcus applied to his company's books. They set shared goals the same way they each set professional goals, specific, time-bound, and reviewed regularly. They identified what was working and what wasn't with the same directness they would use in a board meeting. And critically, they assigned ownership, not in a transactional way, in a clarity way. Who was responsible for what, and how would they support each other in it? Here is the number that makes this concrete. Within 18 months of starting this system, they had paid off $42,000 in combined personal debt that had been sitting there for years, making both of them quietly anxious without ever being directly addressed. Within 2 years, they had built a joint investment portfolio that didn't exist before. Marcus's company crossed the $3 million revenue mark. Danielle's consulting firm landed its largest client ever. Were those professional wins a direct result of the marriage operating system? Not entirely. But Marcus is consistent about this when he talks about it. He says that the mental clarity that came from not carrying unresolved tension in his closest relationship freed up cognitive and emotional energy that he had been unknowingly burning for years. When the home is stable in a real way, not a performed way, everything else builds faster. But here is the part that nobody expects. The twist in this story is not about money. The money is real, and the money is impressive, but it is not the point. The twist is what Danielle said when someone asked her if treating their marriage like a startup had made it feel less romantic. She paused for a long time before answering. And then she said this. She said that the most romantic moment of her marriage was not their wedding day. It was the Sunday morning Marcus rolled a whiteboard into their living room and said, "I think we deserve our best thinking." Because in that moment, she understood that he was not trying to manage her. He was refusing to be casual about her. And there is a profound difference between those two things. Think about that distinction for a second. In most relationships, the default is to be intensely intentional in the early stages, the planning, the effort, the attention, and then to gradually let that intentionality relax as comfort sets in. We call that comfort. But sometimes, what we are calling comfort is actually neglect wearing a familiar face. What Marcus and Danielle figured out is that the people and the things that matter most are not the ones that can run on autopilot. They are the ones that deserve the most intentional attention, sustained over time, not just in the beginning when everything is new and easy. This is also not a system designed for couples who have everything together. Marcus is honest about the fact that they almost did not make it to that Sunday morning. There were months in 2018 where both of them were privately wondering if this was still the right partnership. The whiteboard was not a celebration. It was a last serious attempt before the alternative became real. And that context matters, because it means this is not a story about exceptional people doing exceptional things. It is a story about two people who were exhausted and scared and chose to bring their full intelligence to the one problem they had been trying to solve with half of it. Here is what we want to ask you directly, because the people who watch these stories tend to have thought about this more than they let on. Do you think intentionality and romance can coexist? Or does the planning kill the feeling? Drop your honest answer in the comments right now, because this question gets genuinely interesting answers and yours might be the one that someone else needs to read today. If this story shifted something in how you think about love or partnership, or what it actually means to take someone seriously, share it. Not because the view count matters, but because there is probably someone in your life right now who is in the middle of what Marcus and Danielle were in the middle of in 2018. Smart, capable, quietly losing ground, and they have not found the frame yet. This story might be it for them. The greatest act of love is not the feeling, it is the decision, made again and again, to bring your best self to the person you chose. That is not a startup mentality. That is just what it looks like when love grows up.